Here with Emma Hardyman. Thank you so much for joining us. And a lead singer, a lyricist, songwriter, guitar player for Little Moon, your band, and you just won the Tiny Desk concert competition for this year. A big deal. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much, Max, and thank you for having me here.
Oh, thrilled. Your music is incredible. I hope that all the people who watch this, a lot of them are already going to be, they're going to be watching this because they love Little Moon. But those who haven't heard your music need to listen, because we'll be sharing some of those clips, but it really is wonderful.
Thank you.
So I want to know, what is it like? You've been submitting pieces to Tiny Desk for 4 years?
Yeah, for the past 4 years we've been submitting, sometimes with the band and sometimes just myself.
Yeah.
Always just sort of a ritual, used to be a ritual thing for myself to, I guess, just formulate my music in a comfortable space, and that also kind of pushes my creativity.
Yeah, and we were even talking before, it gives you a deadline. It helps you get something done.
It does, yeah. And I'm like, it's just for me anyway, right?
No, you won and now you're stuck with it.
I know, that's what I'm trying to process right now. It's
I wonder
crazy.
though, you know, everyone watching knows. They know what it's like when they apply for a job, when they send something out, when they turn in the essay to their teacher.
Right.
What is it like for you when you click submit? You've worked on this song, you've worked on the orchestration, you've worked on the video, and finally you send it. What is that like?
Well, for this particular time of submitting, it was kind of a funny story, because I submitted it just thinking it was going to be like any other submission where I don't win. And right after submitting it, I actually pulled like a tarot card that I'll sometimes just pull for fun. You know, like it's a sort of meditation is how I view. I don't view it as like predictive. But I pulled a card, and it was the 8 of Wands, which if people can look it up, you could just Google it, 8 of Wands. And the description that I read online was saying that a lot of fast-paced movement would be happening. And it specifically mentioned that maybe you'll go on tour and travel, you know, the country.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh, like, this is just a joke, like, you know. But part of me was kind of like, what if it did win? And, you know, I don't know whether or not.
And it is so not a joke now, is it?
It's not a joke.
This is a new reality for you.
It's a big reality.
This is a huge transition. Describe that.
Yeah, I think it's a really big shock to the system for someone who isn't used to winning. And I think in my own body and in my own mind, it is a huge sort of a trauma almost that happens. I think I explained to you before. When you repot a plant, that plant literally goes through trauma, which is why they recommend that you plant in the summertime, whatever is necessary. But bottom line, when it's replanted, there's space for it to grow more. And that could be daunting. And I feel very similar to that analogy of kind of being this plant that's just been entirely uprooted into a much bigger space, but it's also a really beautiful space, and the soil is really rich and a lot of potential for me to grow. There's scary things about it. There's vulnerability about it, and that challenge to grow into it, right? Oh man, that is a lot. You know, there's something you mentioned that you've submitted as yourself. You've submitted with the band Little Moon. Those two poles of your creativity, it strikes me as really a metaphor for even the way that I hear your songs working, because there's an intimacy
in your songs. There's a sense when you begin, you have this voice that is pure and clear and alone in a way, or just in some cases there's your wonderful submission. What is it, Moonchild number 3, or
Ballad of a Moonchild.
Ballad of a Moonchild number 3, and where it's you and a clarinet, and it took me a while to realize, oh, that's not you double track, it's a clarinet following your voice.
Yeah, which happens to be my brother.
Yeah. Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
We got my brother too, but my brother got his master's in clarinet performance. And
wow.
He lives in Idaho, and for that one, I love just trying to intertwine my personal life and my music as much as I can.
And it really sounded like 2 voices. I mean, that's, an instrument should be a voice in a way.
It's
right?
family. Yeah.
But that is, I wonder what it was like for you learning about your voice, really in both ways, and because you're a writer and you're someone who expresses things, but your voice, just physically, your voice there's a uniqueness, and I wonder if it took you a while to learn the power and the range that you had.
Both my parents are musicians, actually.
Okay.
So my dad studied voice, and my mom's also studied voice. Actually, my dad studied theater, but he sings a lot. And growing up, he would teach voice lessons in our home.
Okay.
So it started out, I think, kind of as us just mimicking. Like, singing was happening all the time.
Yeah.
So I would mimic, students in my dad's studio because it was at home. And I was homeschooled also for not all my school career, but a good portion of it. And then I think that mixed with my childhood being very reserved and being very shy and I would get really stumbled and frustrated with my limited capacity, or what I viewed as a limited capacity to express myself.
Yeah. And that was a limited capacity in terms of your reserve, your personality.
Totally, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was very shy, I was very nervous. I'm the youngest of 7 kids, so I kind of came into an environment where everyone had really distinct opinions already and tastes, and I was like, I thought I was behind.
Yeah.
Almost. So
It's a hard place to be.
It can be for sure. That's just how my difficulty and shadows approached, but over time, I think because my family valued music and the arts so much, that became a really important part for my development in realizing that, yes, I am a nervous person. Yes, I am shy. But those don't need to be considered bad things. If anything, like, those can be things that can deepen my own sense of humanity, and that in conjunction with music became a form of therapy for me to articulate myself. Because even now, like, it's difficult for me to fully articulate myself, I feel. It doesn't quite, words don't always do it justice. But melodies open up this whole other realm of communication and understanding for me. So I picked up a lot with music as a kid.
It sounds like almost your voice, your actual vocalism, helped you with your voice as an artist, as a writer. Did your confidence almost come from the outside in that way, that you realized that you could sing and then, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to be able to express what I'm writing, what I'm thinking?
That's a good question. For me, I think actually the confidence did have to come from the inside out, because I wasn't actually really good at performing as a kid. As a kid, I was kind of the one that I think kind of made everybody else uncomfortable, because they knew that I was the kid that would go up on stage with a mic. And if I was nervous, I would just paralyze and clam up.
Really?
And everyone's like, no. And I could perceive that. But once again, I knew that melody and music made a lot of sense to me. But I was really scared of, at first, that platform and being seen in that way.
You know, I think a lot of people listening to you can really relate to that sense of being terrified. It's stage fright in a sense.
Yeah.
But also, when did that become you expressing who you are? Did that exist in times when you were little and you were going to sing someone else's song? Or was that a bigger deal? I mean, now that you're singing your own words, that is a whole new level of vulnerability.
Totally. Yeah, that's true. And I think for me, gaining my own sense of confidence came from depending on that vulnerability.
Yeah.
So my dad, as I mentioned, is an actor, and I would ask him, I'm like, how do you go about being nervous on stage? You know, how do you not be nervous for a performance?
Yeah.
And he introduced the idea to me that it's actually all a practice, Emma. He's like, you need to practice performing.
Yeah.
And you need to practice being nervous. Everything that we do is really a practice.
Yeah.
And I was always psyching myself up for performance.
Yeah.
But when he introduced and gave me permission to treat it like a practice, then I got to go on stage and be like, I know I'm going to be nervous. I know I'm going to be scared, but I can't practice being brave without being scared,
Yeah.
you know? And I can't practice being loving without being judgmental, you know? I started seeing the world a little bit differently
Yeah.
from that point. And I think now writing my own music and writing my own lyrics became actually a much easier way to express myself musically. Because I studied vocal performance before, and I've done arias, and I've learned other people's music, and that was actually more difficult for me, because the way I learned to get accustomed to the stage was by being vulnerable from the get-go, right?
Oh, you're expressing yourself. You're expressing yourself when you sing your own songs.
Yeah,
And some singers are magnificent at covering, and they can
I love that
take a
skill.
song and transform it
And make it their own.
Yes,
Yeah.
and they're expressing themselves.
Totally.
And but what you're saying is, and I'll bet you can be pretty good at that. And so I look forward in your career to hearing all these permutations of your talent.
I could try.
Because you're right at the start. But what I'm hearing from you is that the expression of your voice with your own thoughts and your own wonderings is that's easier, and the vulnerability is natural, and then you can share that.
Absolutely. It's way easier for me. Like I've tried living my life before, trying to put on facades, trying to be somebody else that I wasn't, and that just it's like really difficult for me to do that, honestly. Like it gets to me mentally, and I think people could tell, honestly. I'm not the best at, like, I couldn't perform despite my nervousness.
Yeah.
I had to just accept that I was going to be nervous, you know?
Yes.
So,
Yeah. It sounds, I mentioned to you, I live with a psychologist, and so the concept that comes to my mind is cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
You're not living your own truth.
Yes, absolutely. I wasn't living my own truth by trying to essentially control how other people were perceiving me.
Yeah.
And so that came in many ways. You know, I didn't want to appear bad to other people. I didn't want to stick out in any way. I didn't want to cause a rift, because if people start noticing me, then that means they can start noticing the things that I'm ashamed of.
Yeah.
You know, and I was really scared of that for a while, and it took a moment for me to kind of be like, there's no other way I can live, you know? Like, when I was scared to talk or communicate, I just wouldn't talk or communicate. And it came to a point where I'm like, there's no way that I can connect human to human without just talking and letting myself fail in that process.
If there's a gift in you to give, then you have to be authentic to give it. You have to be you. Yeah.
Absolutely. I personally couldn't find any other way to approach humanity and approach myself with compassion.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be ruining the mic.
Oh no, not at all. I'm pushing my earpiece in because it kind of starts to pop out, and then
I know. I'm like holding my heart, and I realize I'm like covering the mic. Sorry, Mark.
Our directors would be yelling in my ear if the mic wasn't working. So you're good. And we're talking. For folks who are listening who haven't heard your music, all of this talk and about authenticity and that thing you'll get when you listen to the music, because I think about the song that you submitted and that you won with this year, Wonder Eye. It is, it's incredible. And it is, I was listening to the NPR folks talking about it because it's a national public radio contest. Bobby Carter, who runs the contest, said in this song it feels very familiar, like something maybe you've heard for the first 30 seconds to a minute, where you're just hearing your wonderful voice, but it's mostly alone with some acoustics. And then he says the sound starts to get big after a minute, and it's a gut punch in the best way, is what he said. And then your voice goes into a whole other range into this. Is it a falsetto or is that just range? I think it's probably just range. But he says it just goes up another notch with your voice. And so that's the song we're talking about. And I want to talk about, what did that song start with? Was it a point in life? Was it an idea?
Yeah, it was an event. It was a couple of events that we realized. So Wonder Eye is a song about death, and the multifaceted nature of death.
Yeah.
And our effort, mine and my husband's effort, to approach our human reactions with reverence and compassion.
Yeah. And you were experiencing a death in the family at the time, I understand.
Yeah.
Your husband's mother?
Yeah. My mother-in-law was put on hospice, and they live in Idaho.
Yeah.
So we were just traveling back and forth. It's about a 4-hour drive from where we are. So that whole year, and it was a year after the pandemic, so 2021.
Yeah.
And during all of that, so my process, once again, I don't really start with lyrics ever. I always start with the melody.
Yeah.
I always start with a song that, from there, I'm like, oh, this song is trying to tell me something. I'm feeling something about this event.
Wow.
And then after that, I try to plug back the words to that make sense of the melody that I created first.
How does that happen? Are you are you on that drive and are you humming? Are you hearing it in your mind?
Yeah.
Both?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of both, and it kind of varies. Sometimes it'll start with like a chord progression. Sometimes it'll just be like, typically it's just a melody.
Yeah.
You know, like da 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 da, and I'm like, oh, like I just had this melody popping up throughout hospice. And I think partway through hospice care is when I realized, I'm like, oh, this is definitely a song about death. And it was after my mother-in-law passed away that I invited my husband to actually write the lyrics for Wonder Eye.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm like, this is his mother's death.
Yeah.
And he was going through a process. We're both going through the process of like officially leaving the LDS church.
Yeah.
And I just felt like it was a lot for him. And so I invited him to write down his feelings through these lyrics.
It's I didn't know that, and that is wonderful to hear. When you were talking about the transition that you were going through, those two things happening, those are big life events and changes. You talk about that trauma of being replanted, and that's a lot at once. Did the music help with that?
100%. I mean, I think that's what music is for me. It is always a way to process and gain perspective on these things that seem kind of unbearable sometimes. Or too big. And it doesn't always have to be traumatic. It's, love, when I fall in love, that's another big moment where I'm like, well, I don't know how to articulate this. I must write it, into music.
It's cool to hear that Nathan had written those lyrics. One thing that came to mind when you're talking about the melody coming to you first, that's something I told you I just fiddle around a little bit with a guitar and just for fun. And I've never really experienced that melodically like you're saying. And it made me think about the Beatles and Paul McCartney coming up with the tune to Yesterday. And that beautiful melody. It's just a transcendent melody.
I think he got it like in a dream or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
But at first they were singing scrambled eggs.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they didn't have lyrics for it.
Yes.
And it took bringing it to the band or bringing it to John Lennon and getting those lyrics in there. So that's really cool to hear. So
thank you.
When I think about the words in that song, even the title, people will see the title, and I is E-Y-E on the title of the song. But what I'm hearing in the lyrics, it sounds like you're asking, or you're saying, I wonder, I wonder.
Yes.
So are both of those things at work there?
Yeah, it's definitely a play on words, very intentional play on words, kind of a, writing this kind of in-between realm state. Where it is saying more primarily like, I wonder. But then it also says, like a circle, I'm like a circle, where all of this is like kind of one eternal round, that we're approaching.
And what do you see and what will you see? And thinking about that transition through death.
Yes.
Those are big things to think about. Let me tell you something funny.
Okay.
As you get big, the people will start to mishear your lyrics for different things. And what I heard the first time I listened to Wonder Eye, there's the lyric that is the lyric.
This happens a lot.
Tell me if you've heard this before. Then.
Okay.
To the sky, to the sky. I first heard. To this guy, to this guy, and I was thinking, oh, it must be a love song. She's singing it to her husband.
I'll give my all to this guy,
to this guy, and I was thinking, I wasn't feeling that with the whole vibe of the song. But
wow,
but, okay.
Honestly,
and then I realized on the second hearing, oh, the sky, yeah. So
I think honestly, it's better when people get to mishear it. I think that kind of leans into what we've talked about before. I think humans are always going to be misunderstanding each other's humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that's just such a lovely approach of just like, yes, like to the sky or to this guy.
To this guy. Yeah, I was just, and then, but it really clicked into place once that happened.
Makes sense eventually.
So you mentioned your parents, and you've been going through so much with music and with life. Role models and mentors, who do you look to as someone who's like, okay, that person did it right, and maybe that is something of a path that can look like mine?
Let me think about that. A path that can look like mine. I think what I look to are just anybody. They can be really profound teachers. They can be really close friends, family. They can just be people on the street who are willing to show all of their humanity and not be afraid to fail in front of other people, not be afraid to say something and be like, oh, actually, I think I might have gotten that wrong.
Yeah.
I think people who are willing to not hold themselves to themselves, but who approach life with openness and compassion for themselves and for others, those are always going to be examples. And I see that everywhere, like I see it really everywhere.
For people listening to you who are that shy young person who feels like there are things they love, but that's not something they can share. what have you learned? How did it happen for you that you felt like you could share those things?
I think it was a willingness to see those things in myself first, and say to myself that it's allowed to exist. I think it took me no longer abandoning parts of myself because I thought they were bad.
Yeah.
I think it was me being willing to see it, vocalize it to myself, and say, this part of me is also me.
Yeah.
And maybe that's worth loving and worth giving reverence towards, because I thought of it or because I felt it, and not being quick to moralize myself over it. You know?
You don't jump to that judgment necessarily.
I try not to. I think it's natural for me to jump to that judgment, but trying to catch myself in that jumping, and even see the jumping and say, that's okay.
Yeah.
You were jumping because you were scared, you know?
Yeah.
And hold it all with compassion.
That's, boy, you've got to be able to do that if
It's
you're going to be in
hard.
front of people
Yeah.
and doing what you do. Okay, on a lighter note, there's some, in terms of what you do with music, there's some examples that came to mind, and they're not direct. They're not like a direct, you know, this equals this, but what you do with your music, with your arrangements, what your band does, and with your voice. So these are all old guy comparisons, but I want to hear what comparisons might ring with you too, what you might think about. Michael Stipes with REM. I don't know if you've listened to REM at all. I'm an old, you know, this is old stuff.
I love this.
But he has this, the word ethereal was used by one of the judges talking about your song. And that was, who said that? That was Baby Rose, who said she was taken aback by how ethereal your sound is, and it reminded me of, I don't need that, of Michael Stipes, the lead singer of REM, and they have this intimacy that leads up to big orchestration and a big sound, but that can also just tear at your heart. Roy Orbison, because of that vocal range. Have you ever listened to Roy Orbison?
A little bit, yeah.
His vocal range is extraordinary and does the same thing. And then the female singer that came to mind, she doesn't have your range. Her voice is very different, but the way that she connects, it was Linda Ronstadt.
Wow.
And I don't know if you've listened to her at all, but amazing. But what she does can, she can belt out a tune that brings a haul to its knees, and at the same time can be sad and can be and can live in the emotions. Does it feel like a lot of pressure when I say those things, or does it feel like pressure when you think about the extent that some of your songs go to that grand place? Do you feel pressure that you have to get there each time?
No, I feel like, again, I don't. All those expansions, those are all just how I'm feeling, you know. Sometimes they expand, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And if other people also put a lot of pressure on it, the way I view it is, wow, like, Max, thank you for seeing me that way, you know. And I hold a lot of gratitude for people who just put their own kind of stamp of perspective on mine, no matter how different it might be.
Yeah.
So I think it's all just one kind of lump sum of gratitude that I feel personally.
It's you're going to be going on tour.
Yeah.
That is amazing, and someone's going to be organizing that tour for you.
Yeah,
I mean, your
not
world
us.
really is changing, isn't it?
It really is.
Do you know what that's going to? Do you know yet where you're going? What it's going to be like? What kind of venues?
Yeah, so it's a national tour. So they're taking us all across the United States. We're going to LA, to Brooklyn, to Chicago, to Atlanta, to Seattle. Dallas. Like there's I mean, I need to pull up the tour schedule. Actually, you're reminding me, but it's a lot of diversity that we're going to be engaging with, and that's something that can be overwhelming, but also just incredibly exciting. I love just being able to get to see and witness and be a part of various other people's humanities and experiences.
You have a band with complexity, like a band. There's a harp. There's, there's a.
She's the best part.
Honestly, a wonderful and amazing part of Wonder Eye. But that's a lot to get down in a live performance. That's a lot to get right in a live performance. But I imagine it's pretty fun to play with the band there.
Oh, it's the best to play with the band. They are truly some of the best people, best musicians that I know. So to get to embark on this whole journey with them has been, I don't have words for my gratitude for it, because they're all needing to uproot their lives as well. And I don't think there's any other group of people that I'd want to do that with.
Well, I'm excited for you all that you don't have to think about booking the motel or renting the van or all those kinds of things.
Very cushy.
That's really cool. You do have a concert coming up this week.
I do.
This Friday at the Gallivan Center in Salt Lake City. So Friday, we'll make sure that information is there for folks. I'm going to be camping on that day, so I'm kind of mad. I hope that your tour is going to hit Salt Lake City as well.
Thank you so much.
Do you know if is the Tiny Desk tour going to get here?
No, they expressed remorse for that, but and we'll have to include information for this. I am also playing at Fork Fest, which is a little American folk music festival.
Oh, okay.
That's going to be taking place. It was planned before I found out that I was winning. And it's going to be like about a week before we head out on tour. So we're kind of just counting it as part of it.
It can be a wonderful dress rehearsal and a great place to,
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to remember that date because I really do want to see you live. And tomorrow, you've already recorded your Tiny Desk concert.
Correct.
I've seen the Instagram photo. Bly, your drummer, put that out. Very fun.
Oh yes, Bly are they do, I think, bass. Oh, was it Chris, the drums?
No, I think it was Bly. So I was getting mixed up. Bly does bass. Okay, and Chris does drums. Okay, great. So anyway, but tomorrow, look at that online because it's going to drop tomorrow. Your Tiny Desk concert. I mean. You're just on that list. It's going to be, you can watch Usher or Taylor Swift or Little Moon or, who else on there? I saw Louis Capaldi the other day.
Yeah, no big deal.
Oh, nothing. Whatever. It is such a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm grateful that you came in to say hello and share.
Max, I feel really special that I got to meet you and that we get to just share in these conversations. It means a lot to me, and I really appreciate your willingness to hold me and see me in this way.
Thank you.